of this clock says past, even if that one doesn't. So I'm going to go with it rather than sit here. I say this every time. Welcome to another exciting instalment of cabinet meetings. Single substantive item on the agenda today. I'll fly through the early bits of it. So one, to note membership of the cabinet for this year following the AGM. It's an item to note. I don't expect you to vote on it. I'm sure you're all comfortable with your membership of the cabinet. From fingers crossed anyway. Number two, minutes of the last meeting of cabinet held in April. Any thoughts, comments on any of that? Nope. Happy. Apologies for absent. I think we're all here, Mr. Business Manager. Yeah, nods. Good. Any declarations of interest? Nope. Great. In which case, we'll move on to that substantive item, which is improving the provision of special educational needs and disabilities support. A few comments on it myself, but I'll hand over to yourself, Tracy, first to introduce it, if that's okay.
You happy for me to speak seated? Thank you, Chairman. So the Cabinet report follows the recent inspection of the local area partnership for SEND provision in Nottinghamshire. That's a partnership between the local authority, NHS providers and education, be that mainstream schools or specialist provision. It explains the challenges nationally to SEND provision, including the huge increase for demand versus resources available, and that can be ed psychologists, school places or therapeutic services. The inspection outcomes speak to what the partnership does well, but more significantly at present to what we need to do better, and that includes two areas for priority action. Since the inspection, work at the LA and amongst partners is well underway to establish an improvement board and to address the challenges with urgency. The key considerations for Cabinet today are to seek Cabinet's approval for the local authority as one partner, to receive the inspection report and to formalise the arrangements for improvement work. And there are three recommendations to that effect on pages 10 and 11 of the report, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Worth saying, obviously, not the first time we've looked at SEND provision or wider children's provision as a cabinet and national authority. In fact, I've just been talking to Bruce here about how and where it features in the council plan as we go forward. So not news that we aim to kind of seek to improve our support for our most vulnerable children, indeed at the heart of the council plan in many ways. And I'm really pleased that since not just the published outcomes of the Ofsted inspection, but since the inspection itself took place, that I think across the partnership people have stepped in and really sought to get to grips with this and get some early steps in place to drive that improvement. So in some ways, I guess, we could have sneaked a level 2 outcome over the line and perhaps not looked at it again in the same detail. It's positive at least that there will be this focus and there will be this drive for improvement. I think if council look at the recommendations in the plan, and particularly the appointment of Dame Christine Lenihan, will recognise hopefully the good reputation that she brings, the experience that she brings, and counsel disabled children along with her in terms of that experience and support to help the partnership to get this right. Which again, that independent oversight, and I think somebody of her kind of stature and reputation in government will be really helpful for us in terms of driving something positive in all of this. Keith, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I think the word partnership's been used quite a lot already in this meeting, and I think that's part of why I'd like to speak, really, because it's not just external partners; it's also partners within this council, and I consider the Economic Development and Asset Management Committee cabinet as part of that membership. So I thought it might be helpful to appraise members of what the Economic Development and Asset Management have done over the last few years, and also what we're planning to do, just to give you a flavour of how we're trying to do our bit in terms of the provision. So we have undertaken programmes of activities which commenced with the new build of Orchard School in Newark, which opened in September 2020, providing accommodation for 140 places from nursery through to post-16. In autumn 2022, we completed a 2-storey extension with 3 additional classroom spaces in the ASD hub for a further 30 pupils. Additionally, in autumn 2023, we completed an extension in Derry Mount School consisting of 2 classroom modular buildings, providing 20 additional spaces. In January 2023, a remodelled existing building was opened to provide 24 extra places for Stubbin Wood in Mansfield, and a further scheme for an additional 9 places at Bracken Hill School will be undertaken this summer. In addition to these extensions, in January 2023, I approved the development of a new SEND school for Ravensdale in Mansfield. This will provide 160 places specifically for pupils with SEMH and ASD and Key Stage 2 to Post 16. The programme is for this to open during the 25-26 academic year. Colleagues may also be aware that Yeomans Park School has been successful with the DFE school rebuilding programme. This means that the school will be being built, and the council has committed to fund of an expansion by a further 28 places, expected 24-25. And one of the things that's happened over the last, particularly since we became cabinet, really, I've been working a lot closer with Councillor Taylor and indeed Councillor Barney in terms of making sure that we integrate all the different departments so that we work closer together. And I hope to continue to do that moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Really helpful. And I think in the as you say, partnership mentioned a lot. There's obviously a key partnership here with the health service, and important that we both deliver that effectively and scrutinise that effectively. But within the council, as colleagues will know, particularly since we moved to the cabinet system, there has been a drive and will continue to be a drive for us to deal with things collectively as a cabinet and as an authority, not in our departments. And this is another example of where these things absolutely do fit together, and some of the answers, although it's a kind of children's lead on special educational needs, some of the answers and some of the work we can do to improve it don't fit in that department, perhaps fit in other places. So there is collaboration across the board. I'm grateful to colleagues who have kind of taken those challenges away as well in recent weeks and looked at it internally in their own portfolios as to how and where we are moving things forward. John?
I'm coming from the same angle as Keith is, with working with Tracy and with Matt Barney through Local Communities Fund, and I'm not sure that everybody knows exactly what funding we do put out into the communities to support young people with SEND, and there are projects which we specifically go to support them. An example being is that 2022-23, £213,000 has been awarded to 20 organisations for the benefit of young people with disabilities to support both revenue and capital initiatives. Also, of 13 revenue projects, 9 projects have funding committed for the next 3 financial years. That's 23 to 25 inclusive, of 107,000 per year, totaling 323,000. And also 7 local improvement schemes revenue projects supporting children and young people with disabilities were awarded a total of 52,000 each year for 3 years, which is 156,000. And just to give you a flavour of a couple of organisations that we have supported during this year is the Playhouse Trust, which Shine Theatre Groups deliver 150 sessions per year in 6 locations across the county. Since 2018, they've supported 6,000 children and young people, mainly with learning disabilities, to experience performing arts, increasing their confidence and emotional well-being. And one other example is from Worksop Oasis Community Church, and they're offering a wide array of projects and activities for all members of the community. Projects include Treasure Kids and supporting children and young people with disabilities. So that's just a touch of flavour of what we do through the Local Communities Fund in supporting those people who are in need, leaders. So I just wanted to express that to the Cabinet so they were aware of that. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Grateful for that. And my experience of some of that support directly, I work with chair a kind of group in Mansfield that works across some of those providers, Unanima Theatre, Inspire, Portland College, and others, on that kind of cultural programme and the wider community work that we do, some of which we fund through the LCF. And I have to say, some of the routes to that, some of the support, particularly to young people with SEND, are excellent, and some more work going on there, trying to how we map that into pathways that can be more effective in the long term. But absolutely fair to say, and I think the report, if colleagues would recognise, speaks to that wider community engagement in all of this, as well as our kind of formal and statutory parts of it. So more work in that space, very welcome. There's some recent new LCF funding just been announced as well, isn't there? A number of strands of that that encourage colleagues to have a look at. Matt.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, and following on from the comments that have already been made, obviously in the last 12 months, I've been working closely with all of our Cabinet colleagues and have greatly appreciated the wider Cabinet support in managing the portfolio of adult social care. But poor Tracy probably works more closely with me than anybody else, just because of the nature of the overlap that obviously exists from birth to death, ultimately, of residents across Nottinghamshire, and ensuring that there is seamless transition of our services and integration wherever possible. Now, just looking at the report, I note that it does highlight that transitions between children and social care is experienced as good by families and children in Nottinghamshire. And I've been working closely with Councillor Taylor on a programme called Preparing for Adulthood, considering how wider access to the Maximising Independence Service can increase our support for families and young people at an earlier age. And I intend that this work will continue, and we continue to build ever closer relationships as well with the ICB, bringing more of this into the wider improvement work as a result of this report. So just to reiterate, I look forward to the next 12 months and working ever closer with the whole Cabinet on this, and also with the Children's Department. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And our improvement board will hopefully help to bring together all of those partners as well, with that independent scrutiny from Dame Christine and others that can drive some of this forward. But it's worth recognising, as you describe, there are some things in the report where there are significant national challenges that we would recognise. There are some things in the report, like the transition to adulthood, that we historically have recognised and start to put work streams in place long before the recent Ofsted report. So a lot of work been going on in that space, and we'll continue to drive that forward, perhaps with a bit of extra focus and whatever resource we need to make that happen. But I'm grateful for that collaboration in particular. Was there anyone else who wanted to speak up?
Want to speak? Thank you. Thank you. The report mentions, and unreservedly accept, that additional workforce capacity is required to secure improvements in timeliness. We know that, it mentioned in the report, no problem. We do accept that, of course we do. But this is against the background of national shortages in this very key area. We are doing what we can, to use the words in the report, of growing our own. Work has already started within HR and the education psychology team to identify how we can make use of the grow your own approach, and also how we can retain our assistant and trained psychologists. This, as I repeat, and it's important to keep saying this, against the backdrop, national shortage in this field of work, which in short term, we don't want to do this, but we have to do it, is to look to agencies to fill that gap. We are discussing, and we keep on having discussions with universities, schools, colleges, the amount of workers, Leader, only too well, and as you do, Deputy Leader, that we've been putting into recruiting and retaining graduates, apprentices, and that is being stepped up all the time. We will not rest in that regard. So we are optimistic, I can use the word guardedly, that we can address some, at least in the short term, and more so in the long term, what the report wants us to do. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks, Gordon. And yeah, absolutely. I mentioned some of the national challenges in that, and obviously workforce pressures across the country are hugely difficult, but we need to drive that here. We need to drive that locally, and a lot of work been going on in that space. Clear, not just across children's and the SEND world, but across adults as well, and other parts of the workforce, everything. Huge workforce challenges for us to tackle, and been really grateful for recent conversations with you and officers about that. I think a really positive and flexible approach, hopefully going forward. But yeah, one of those much more complex challenges for us to tackle, as I'm sure colleagues will recognise. Bruce.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and I welcome working with the Improvement Board. It will obviously improve the service of SEND across the whole of Nottingham. I think it's important that I mentioned, as the author of the Nottinghamshire Plan, that SEND is a recognised part of our plan, 10-year plan. It is one of the first. It is the first action in Ambition 2, supporting communities and families, as we're well aware how keen the leader is in getting into those areas of Nottinghamshire that are less favoured, less well off than some other areas, to be able to improve, in inverted commas, their lot. I will read out Ambition 2.1 for you as the author of the plan, along with Derek. I think it's very important to recognise this. And 2.1 states: work with our partners to improve the outcomes and experience of children with special educational needs and disabilities, SEND. This will see that they have their needs identified and met at the earliest opportunity. The timelines of statutory assessment process improves. The confidence of the parents and carers in the ability of their local mainstream schools to meet the specialist needs of their children, young people, is increased, and there is a sufficient delivery of high quality specialist education provision as set out in the Specialist Place Planning Strategy 2021-26. And I think that's borne out in what Keith has been talking about as far as provision is concerned, both particularly in Newark and in Mansfield. And as part of the monitoring process of the Nottinghamshire Annual Delivery Plan 3, new measures to monitor progress have been included, and they include number of additional specialist places provided for children with specialist educational needs and disabilities. Actually, the next one is the number of new education, health and care plans issued within 20 weeks. That again is a statistic, is up, and the percentage of the new educational, health and care plans issued within 20 weeks, excluding exceptions. So I think it's important that we recognise to this administration, and it is written there large in the Nottinghamshire Plan. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks, Bruce. And important to point that out. As I said, this wishing and working to improve things in this space is not something that we've only thought about in recent weeks. It's written large in that Nottinghamshire Plan. I think from a personal perspective, go back several years. I actually sat on the years ago and digging into some of the national implications of the legislation, led to the white paper from Department for Education Regional Green Paper that looks at a more inclusive strategy, that looks at whether we've got the right mix of both funding and kind of expectation in a sense of what can be delivered and the challenges of the current climate. And I think as a committee at that time we concluded that legislation is very well-meaning in terms of offering support, created within it some significant challenges actually in terms of delivery of these outcomes and getting the best outcomes for children and young people. So all sorts of that to work through on a national level. I think some of that we've recognised and have been trying to work through. Other things in the report that we need to recognise on a local level need to be delivered more effectively, particularly some of the scrutiny of the partnership and the way we engage in the partnership. And that's something that I hope both internally and through the ICB and the independent board will be able to take forward. and significant resource and focus on this piece of work over the next 12 to 18 months in particular, as we kind of drive that improvement programme. I would hope and expect Cabinet colleagues to buy into that. I would hope and expect officers across the spectrum to buy into that piece of work and that focus as well. And that when we come back to that re-inspection in 18 months' time, I'd expect to see significantly improved outcomes. And that's something we should all be focused on and working towards. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say, Tracy, before we wrap up. Yeah.
Thank you. It's really just to acknowledge some of the comments that have been made around the room and to say, that I'm really grateful for the work and support of the departments across the council. There's been a lot of conversation about partnership, so internally and externally, as Keith said, but also picking up on that mixture of statutory and voluntary partners as well, which John alluded to. So this really is a whole geography approach, a system-wide approach. You've referenced, Leader, the period that we've been considering nationally the work on SEND. The SEND review was first launched in September 2019. The Green Paper was published in March last year, and the AP and Improvement Plan was published in March this year. We are still awaiting that final clear and specific guidance from government as to how we will approach this and what comes next. I think one of the things that has come out of receiving this and hearing comments like Gordon's about employment is sparking us to a little bit of more innovative thinking. So whether it's Grow Your Own, whether it's apprenticeships, whether it's graduate schemes. And I wanted to actually touch on one site particularly that Keith mentioned, Stubbin Wood, which Councillor Anderson and I actually visited on Friday of last week with officers. And that is an outstanding example of innovative work and innovative thinking, a little bit by design and a little bit by serendipity, but the partnership there of having a mainstream school, King Edward's, and a specialist provision, Stubbin Wood, on a shared campus, and the ability that gives for focused work with the children who have the special needs, but to mix with children who are in a mainstream setting so that children with special needs are not other. They are of us and of our community. And that was a shining example of that kind of innovation, and something that the representatives from both multi-academy trusts spoke to Councillor Anderson and I on that day about. And that's obviously something that we need to think more of, a little bit more of thinking innovatively and freshly. So I think, Chair, that's all I have to say, other than to ask for support through the recommendations on the papers today, that we can actually crack on with vigour with what we need to do next.
Thanks, Tracy. I'm grateful for your focus on this and the in-depth knowledge of it that you've brought to the conversations as well in recent weeks. I think colleagues will be able to see the recommendations on page 4 and 5, or maybe 10 and 12 of the document pack, which in short call for us to bring back this draft action plan and to set the terms of reference for the improvement board at our next meeting in June. So we'll kick off. I say kick off. I mean, some of that work has been ongoing, go through the council plan, but more recently, since the Ofsted inspection, in terms of starting to pull these things together, obviously we've approached and lined up Dame Christine, subject to our approval here today, so to approve her appointment as some independent leadership of the improvement board. And we will come back in June and assess those next steps and take this forward. There'll be continued focus through Cabinet and through those kind of scrutiny functions and others over the coming months as we pull this thing together. So again, I would be grateful for and welcome colleagues' buy-in and involvement in that across the board, both in Cabinet and our wider group and opposition members, of course, in terms of holding us and feet to the fire on this improvement work. So let's go for all those in favour of those recommendations. Thank you very much. We'll draw that to a close. As I said at the beginning, just the one substantive item on the agenda this week. So draw the meeting to a close. Expect a very busy agenda at June Cabinet. I think there's about 10 things on it already. So bear in mind, clear your diaries for that particular date. But thank you for your engagement this morning, and I will draw the meeting to a close.